I think that, and then you just got a PDF from Kristen that basically just lays out all the things we have to talk through. And then it does pull out two things we had talked about during the budget workshops of making special appropriations, and pulls those out of the budget. So you can just kind of see where, where we would be if we started off by taking some things out that aren't really recurring items. And we can go through that in a little bit, but I thought we could start number one on the agenda. Everybody got yesterday the final CIP report from Jude. And basically they took what I had recommended, and the primary change was they just added some money into the vehicle replacement fund, right? So the whole account was going up $65,000 more than what had been recommended originally back in October. And then they had also mentioned jumpstarting kind of this replacement program through doing a special appropriation. And so the question was, well, how much should that be? And does that affect the schedule in CIP? Do we change things there? Do we want to keep that 65 in or not? And so Kristen and John kind of pulled together and stepped back and came up with a recommendation that essentially says, leave the 65 in there as an ongoing funding, for this year, that increase of 65, and keep that going. And then also do a special appropriation to purchase 3 additional trucks for about $600,000. And then what it does is it gets us really jumpstarts the program, and we're able to replace in the next year and a half or 2 years a majority of the must replace kind of vehicles that were on the list. So that's a very high level summary. So I thought it would be helpful for them to just at least explain that real quickly. And it's an argument for saying let's keep the CIP request in there, and then and then make a recommendation to the Board of Finance to handle the rest of the vehicles through a special appropriation, the 3. So do you want to just briefly explain that a little bit more, John, what this does?
Sure.
Or Kristen, I don't know who's best to, or
I have John, do you want me to share your summary of the scenarios?
Yes, please. I think that'll be helpful. And either I can discuss it or you can, Stacy. It doesn't matter.
No, you can do it.
Okay.
Let me just find.
The thing that Kristen sent us a couple minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone going to walk us through that, or?
Yeah, that's for a conversation in a little bit. I just wanted, since John is here.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. I just wasn't trying to read it real quick. Do I need to?
No. We're going to walk through it. It's really just taking numbers you've already seen. I kind of have a different way of approaching it. I like to do more of a walkthrough from one budget to the last, and that's what I was trying to do there. But I'll walk you through that in a few minutes.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second. I lost John's sheet.
That's what I was doing, Stacy. I was filling time for you.
Buying me time?
Yeah.
Where is it? Okay. It's here. Okay.
Okay.
Guys,
So Scott, you won't be able to see this once you're in the car, but you can just listen.
what do you guys see right now? Sorry, I have 3 screens going on, so I want to make sure you can see.
Yeah,
I
can see it now. I can see
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, John. If you need anything else, let me know.
Okay, thank you. So this, I just put together, we discussed these 4 scenarios and Finance and myself put together that much more detailed spreadsheet, but I figured I would just summarize this. It's just a little bit easier to look at. And basically what it is I'll just go down through each scenario. The top row, there's 4 different scenarios. The top row is the fleet study recommendation. And what that entails is 21 vehicles to be replaced over year 1, in year one and 31 vehicles over this 5-year period. And that scenario would get us, really make us current, and it would replace all the vehicles that are have reached their life expectancy. So there's no problem vehicles out there, I guess. And then under that ideal scenario, so what went into the CIP, the next row is the funding at $235,000 per year, which would increase by 5% each year. That's what went into the CIP. And so as you can see, that's a somewhat scaled back version, and it only gets 4 vehicles in year one, and 20 vehicles at the end of the 5-year plan. So there would still be some vehicles left, I guess 11 vehicles left that are beyond their life expectancy at that point.
And that 235 is the one that and the team here and you guys had talked about in October, what we submitted to CIP. So that 235 was the kind of starting discussion. And that was already an increase, right? Didn't we bump up the reserve from how much did we put in with that 235? How much is that over last year's funding for this?
I think it was 170,000 last year. So yeah. So
it's still, the 235 was still a bump to do this catch up. Just to keep that in perspective. So last year, that fund only was getting $175,000 a year. Right.
So then in the discussions with the CIP committee, it was the committee really requested that what will this look like if we bump the $235,000 per year up to $300,000 per year. And that helped a little bit in terms of the number of trucks that could be purchased. So it added one truck over the 5-year period, but still the same number of vehicles overall, 20 vehicles overall. So that's a slight improvement. And then the fourth scenario is where we discussed about what if we, start out with a request of a $600,000 special appropriation where we can buy 3 vehicles up front, 3 heavy-duty trucks, and fund each year at $300,000 plus we increase that by 3%. Each year, so it's a little bit over $300,000 per year, and so this table sort of summarizes everything that under that fourth scenario where we jumpstart this program with a $600,000 special appropriation. That allows us to get 30 vehicles, virtually all vehicles identified in the fleet study within this 5-year program. In 6 years, it would be all vehicles. There's 1 vehicle in year 6, and so the biggest priority that I've been mentioning in these discussions is the need for the heavy trucks, which are really our most important vehicles, and they're the oldest. And so you can see that under this scenario, we would still get 3 heavy trucks in year 1, and then 1 each additional truck in the next 3 years. So under all of these scenarios, we would get the 6 trucks, all the scenarios except for the first one, the 235,000 scenario. We would have all 6 trucks replaced at the end of the 5-year program. And I think this would be very helpful in terms of getting the 3 trucks in year 1, and then the additional trucks, 1 truck each additional, the following 3 years after. I think there's somewhat of an advantage to kind of spreading this out a little bit, so that we can stagger this and we're not in this cycle where we're replacing you know, all 6 trucks every 12 years. And it's not mentioned really in here, but two of the 6 trucks, we replaced the bodies on and the hydraulic system in 2017 and 2019. And so I think that stretching this out a couple of years is okay. We did that. We replaced the bodies because we were looking for just a cheaper alternative to buy a little bit extra life out of those vehicles.
And this is also just so the 600,000 will be basically purchasing for cash 3 trucks, right? And then the other assumptions in here is everything else would either be a 5 or a 7-year capital lease, right? Depending on the size of the vehicle.
Yes, that's correct. And also what was done, what Kristen had done with the detailed spreadsheet is extend this out over a 10-year period just to see what that would look like with the overall program. And what that does is, so what I did is I took all the vehicles and prioritized them so that we could put all vehicles in the next like 10-year plan to see what that would look like. And based on that analysis, in the next 5 years, we would be able to wean off of this lease purchase program if that's something the town, thought was appropriate.
John, are the number of heavy trucks included in the number of vehicles, or?
Yes.
And what is your thinking? I see the study recommended 31 vehicles, and 2 of your proposals only identify in the first 5 years 20 vehicles. What's your thinking?
Right. So that was just to present something that was a little bit less aggressive and maybe easier to swallow, and it would get us closer to getting caught up, really. And we would continue to limp along, knowing that we still have some vehicles that are theoretically beyond their life expectancy there.
John, is there any way to estimate the costs of maintaining vehicles over a longer timeline than the study recommends? In other words, are there some hidden costs here that don't appear on this spreadsheet that we should be aware of?
Hidden costs in terms of repair costs.
Yes, downtime, repair costs, inability to get the job done. I don't know.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, there may be, but we've kind of been in a hole for a while now, and this gets us closer. So I don't anticipate that it would be anything real significant in terms of any hidden costs. But I don't know.
I think it would be more hidden. It would be savings, right? Because the more you buy new, the more you're going to save on maintenance.
It would be
in the near term,
because we would be replacing vehicles that still had some value. The large dump trucks that we have traded in, we get virtually nothing for. And once we get into a cycle of replacing those after 12 years, they'll be, we'll be getting more value from those, I think, or more return on them.
So I just want to clarify, a couple, 4 or 5 years ago, we started on a leasing program for this equipment. Are we talking about jumping off of that, just buying the equipment again?
Under these scenarios, this first 5-year plan, each one of these scenarios still involves the leasing program. But what we did do, like I said, in the 4th scenario with the $600,000 special appropriation, we carried that out for 10 years to see if it was possible to get off the leasing program and just purchase these vehicles outright with the $300,000 plus 3% each year. And we found that in the next 5 years, that would be an option.
I think it's certainly up for discussion where we go with that. If we try to go back to a pay-as-you-go, I think the 600K special appropriation is more because if we have reserves, right? So why would we lease something and pay, what is it, 3 1/4? Is that the assumption on here?
Yeah.
Versus, you know, we could just pull it out of the fund, which is only making now, what, 0.25%? So that was the thinking behind doing the special appropriation. I think we'd have to have a longer conversation in the future about what our goals would be. You know, is it to more sustained leasing, which allows us to have more, you know, it's the classic, every even home or car owner does this, right? Lease versus buy. And I think we'd have to go through that thought process.
So the scenario with the special appropriation, so that won't impact the bottom line because the 600,000 is in addition to what's already in, which is the 300,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Right.
What if we did, what would it look like if we did funding 235 plus the appropriation?
I asked that yesterday.
You asked that exact question yesterday, Peggy. And
That's, great minds think alike.
I know. Well,
As
because
they
of
say.
course, yeah, it saves us 65,000 for CIP this year, right? But it does take longer, basically, to get to that replacement time. And
No,
so-
I realize that,
yeah.
but how does it impact the overall budget?
Well, it saves us 65,000. We would just keep the funding at 235. We would put, it would take 65 out of what they're recommending for CIP.
right.
And you're, Aaron, you're asking what does that look like in terms of the fleet, recovering the fleet here? I don't think we didn't actually run that scenario, I don't believe, but
We ran every other scenario you could think of though, so thank you, Aaron. John and Kristen went through about 24.
I was actually thinking, that's the spreadsheet that you had last night, Stacy, where you were putting in different numbers and then it was showing the mill rate on the bottom.
Yep.
With the adjustments. So I was just thinking overall budget. How does it impact that if we deducted 65,000 from the CIP?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, when we're done with this,
Yeah, I
I'm
think
curious. It's probably minimal, but
what I would say about that is when Kristen was looking at the finances on this and just took a simplistic approach of what is the value of all the vehicles we have in our fleet now divided by 10 years, and that's an oversimplification because it's 12 years for the big trucks, but divide by 10 years and you're looking at a $300,000 or $350,000 funding level that would be required.
Right.
So it just, I think what it's showing is that based on the value of our entire fleet now, that's the appropriate funding level that we would need to sustain this.
I think the takeaway I had when we talked about this yesterday was that it's just going to take longer than 5 years. So if our goal is to at least have everything addressed within a 5-year time period, the 300 gives us adequate abilities to get there quickly. If you cut 65,000, that's a compounding effect, right, on the program each year, because we're talking about every year we would do that in your model, right? So you'd be your base level would be 235.
Well, we don't have to though do it.
No, I'm just saying the model she was running was basically either you start your base at 235 and then you just grow that, which is how CIP has worked for this reserve account, right? There's it was 175 and it would grow a certain amount every year, or you started at 300 and grow it out. So it's a scenario that we could certainly run to see how long it would take us to get to our target, because I think once again we don't want to go beyond 5 years, or else it kind of it doesn't really help us, I guess, too much then, but.
Well, at the end of this 5-year period, we should then be coming back around on some of the year one trucks that are going to be coming off lease that'll be candidates for replacement, right?
I think it's 7 for the big trucks, right?
Yes, but you're right, Bruce. The ones that we've purchased over the last 5 years will start coming back around.
So the question I was going to ask on this scenario, if you bumped each year up by 2 trucks, what is the funding that needs to happen? So you get your 30 trucks in 5 years. Each year, instead of you have to go back to the other one. So instead of,
I share this one. You want to see the other one, Bruce, or I have a list of all of the vehicles?
Just the spreadsheet that you had up before that,
Okay.
that showed the scenarios.
You see it?
Yep. So, if we went from 4 to 6, 4 to 6, 5 to 7, 6 to 8, 1 to 3, we get the 31 trucks. They're spread out all over the year. So in the out years, and I'm still a big fan of the leasing strategy because it's a planned obsolescence strategy.
No, I agree. I don't know if we necessarily want to target a pay as you go plan, but
and then what we can do is we can bake into the CIP a pretty known leasing amount every year for the next 5 years or so.
Which is how the police does it, which is pretty predictable and how they rotate their fleet.
Right.
And wouldn't our objective be to try to be consistent across the town, just with a strategy?
It is. I think, though, remember, one of the thing here was trying to take advantage of the cash, right? And that we have to do this. So I think that you can change how much you want to fund the account. We could talk about that, but really what's going to affect that is how much we want to jumpstart the program. If we decide we don't think we should be jumpstarting the program at all, that's going to change all these numbers, right? So
yeah, and I think it's important to look at what the consultant did, where he listed out $1.9 million of vehicles that he is recommending we buy in year one.
Yeah.
Scenario 4 with buying the 3 vehicles cash, we get the majority of the other vehicles, and it's a big list of vehicles. There's about 24, John.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And we get the majority, other than 1, all in year 1. So now we have this study on hand that somebody's telling us that we should really buy these sooner than later. And this scenario 4 really gets us to where we should be, and it gets us on track in after year 4, we'll have all the trucks and all the vehicles, and then we'll start recycling or the replacement cycle, whether we do a purchase or a lease program.
I'm just worried that we have in 2031, we've got 19 vehicles that are going to be in need of replacement.
Yeah.
Well,
In other words, we're creating, if we buy a big slug of vehicles all at once, we're going to have a big slug of vehicles down the line that have to somehow.
Yeah, it's creating a future problem.
I mean, that's a problem. I mean, we're in this hole right now, so we'll have to.
But if we budget it, doesn't mean we have to buy it, right away. To Stacy's point.
Well, that's the slippery slope that we fell into before. We kept saying, "Can you get one more year out of the truck? Can you get one more year out of the truck?"
I gotta think, though, out of 19 vehicles, there's a level of varying degrees of maintenance needed.
Well, and that's why I bring up smearing all of those 31 vehicles over 5 years.
Well, the other option is the special appropriation goes into the account, right? Rather than to build up the account, rather than to buying specific vehicles in year 1.
Which is then used to lease the vehicles, Peggy?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it just kind of, it's kind of offsetting the benefit that we have with the cash, right? So.
So
but it
the
earmarks-
300 a
but it
year,
earmarks.
the 300 a year in the final version of the CIP really doesn't dovetail into the scenario 4, does it?
Well, look, it's right there. The funding that's in CIP right now, they upped it to 300. That gets us 4 of the trucks replaced, but it doesn't, we're still short of 11 vehicles that the consultant is saying we should replace now, right? Because it only does 20 versus 31. And it's not like we have to do every single truck that he's recommending, right? Some of this is a recommendation, but still, that's a pretty, still only, it's only getting 2/3 versus all of them.
Well, right. I mean, I get in a perfect world, we should dump all 19 or 20 trucks in one shot. But I don't know. And I'm just imagining that there is going to be no shortage of good places to drop a special appropriation when we get into it. If there's some way to budget in the headroom into the CNRE for the leases to grow, the fleet of leased vehicles to grow, we just plan on replacing all 31 vehicles in 5 years. In a more or less even year-over-year cadence, with the oldest and most decrepit trucks first. That's my thought on it. In the 4th scenario, you don't have any vehicles being replaced in year 5. Is that just happenstance, or is there a reason for that?
That's just because it worked out that way, because there's everything from small passenger cars worth 30,000 up to the $200,000 trucks. So I think it just worked out that way. And then if what you don't see here is year 6, where I think there's a couple of vehicles in year 6. So yeah, it worked out that way in terms of not going negative on the balance.
As well as applying the criteria that the consultant told us to apply to these vehicles. So it worked out that year we can have that little extra funding towards the purchase of year 6.
So we would just be building the reserve balance
Yep.
By 340,000.
Mm-hmm.
In the interest of keeping us moving, I'm wondering if we're all in agreement that we do need to replace 31 vehicles over the next 5 years. Are we debating that at all? Or are we simply debating the best mechanism and timing? Is anybody objecting to the notion that we need to follow the recommended study targets?
No, I mean, unless John sticks his hand up and says, look, there's a couple of vehicles in there that I know I can get another 5 or 6 years out of. I'm taking the report at its word. I'm only taking issue with doing it all at once.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just so I understand. And so your issue, Bruce, is the concern that they'll all need to be replaced at the same time?
It is that, yes, that they will all come up on a renewal date at some point in the future, all at the same time. And that we will somehow find a way not to do that and find ourselves back in this position.
But can't we plan for that? Well, I mean, that's what we do in CIP, right?
Well, then we have to set up a new reserve that accounts for purchasing those vehicles again.
It is, though. They've grown this out. It is, yeah.
We have it.
It's taking,
We actually have it for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So it does show once these other vehicles start coming on. So we do have a plan, and I don't think if we necessarily buy them all in 1 year that we necessarily have to replace them all in 1 year.
Yeah.
And that's what the plan that John and Kristen worked on as far as spreading it out over the 10 years and then even more.
And that's basically taking the 300,000 a year and growing it at 3% for the next 10 years, right? That account.
Yeah, do we have in the CIP, is there a reserve running balance for the vehicles?
Yeah, I had pulled that up before and then you wanted me to close it. So let me just grab it when I have 3 screens going here. So hang on.
I only have 2. I'm jealous.
So this was what I had. This is the plan right now, and this is the 300,000 as well as a special appropriation for 3 of the big trucks. These are the lease payments in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We took the break, and then this was the 160 that we were working towards a purchase program. Do we want to lease going out there? Maybe, but at this point it's 160 that would convert to more vehicles if we did do a lease. But you can see it goes out. Oh, not on this sheet. I have a different sheet. It does go out for 10 years, you know, putting all of these vehicles on a replacement cycle. By doing this 300,000 and the 600 special appropriation, this is what the balance in the fund will be each of the years.
Okay.
So it's a 300 plus 3% increase a year in funding. And to John's point, there's $3.5 million worth of vehicles spread over 10 years is about 350 a year.
Yeah, I think like from a budget standpoint, I feel like we don't, you know, the special appropriation is going to be a recommendation. Obviously, that's another process we would have to go through. I feel like, you know, going with what the CIP is recommending at the 300 level is kind of a comfort zone. It'd be nice to not have to put another 65 into that, but the 300, if the special appropriation gets whittled down for whatever reason, or doesn't get supported, at least the 300 helps us get to where we need to be no matter what, right? So I guess my view is I'm comfortable going with the CIP recommendation for this year's funding, the increase of 65,000. And then, you know, we have to see where the special appropriation goes. If we can get the 600 and everybody's supportive of that, I think the Board of Finance understanding, you know, this schedule and this planning process, I would guess that they could be supportive of this. That's great. If for some reason we can't do it or some circumstances change, at least we're getting more money into the account to help us. I'm worried if we go to the 235, we're just going to be behind again. You know, we're going to somehow fall behind.
Yeah, and so I'm not suggesting we stay at the 235. I'm suggesting we recalibrate that 235 to a bigger number that allows us to pull these trucks in over a 5-year period. So I'm not suggesting that it stays at 235 at all. It requires an infusion.
So you would want more than 300 going into this fund for this
maybe. I mean, it's just a math exercise at that point. What is it? What do we think that the new?
Well, then you're gonna bump up the budget.
Why don't you just take more out of the do more, a bigger special appropriation request then?
I mean, I think that. Yeah, I mean,
I'm kind of with Aaron on that. I think the same thing.
So keep it at the 235 and then just up the special appropriation request?
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I'm leaning towards.
Well, I mean, it is, if you look at historically, this was only this account was only funded at 175, right? We already bumped it up already once with the first cut at this. And
I think if we bump it up more, we're talking about bumping the budget, which I think that's not what we want to be doing.
I think that there's less of a chance that's going to get supported than a special.
Agreed. Totally agree, Aaron. Totally agree.
Yeah, I think the risk is, or the dilemma is that if at keeping it at the 235, we'd have to modify the schedule because the balance would go negative right away. If you look at line 40 in Stacy's spreadsheet, that number can never be negative. If so, she's got us dancing right on the edge. There is no there is no extra money in the account to
No, but you
But I
pull out
guess-
some of the vehicles though. So
Yeah,
what
I
we're
guess
saying
I-
is doing
yeah,
a
I don't
higher special
understand.
appropriation and then pulling some of the vehicles out that this
Right.
is financing.
Because this was set up before there was any discussion of $600,000 of money going in.
Mhm.
So it's got to change somehow if we're doing 600,000, right? Or is that a dumb question?
No, this assumes you get the 600,000
Oh,
and then
this
you
is-
fund it.
okay.
Yeah. So if we were to instead say we went to $1 million, that's another $400,000, right? Some of the vehicles in her spreadsheet would not be part of this, leasing program. They'd be pulled out. So you could keep a lower funding level in CIP. I think that it raises a number of questions though, because if you're going to a cash purchase plan after year 5, you're going to have bigger balances in this account. If you stay with leasing, you're not going to. You're going to be able to replace more vehicles, each year. So
and that's exactly the point I was trying to make
Yeah.
before.
right. So
to get decided first then?
well, I think that, I don't know. I feel like the CIP, to pull the 65 out, I just don't know. There's a lot of, and this is part of the discussion, there's a couple of other things that we feel should be special appropriations that are one-offs in the budget, right? So, and that's going to be
We're going to spend all that money twice. We're going to spend all the excess fund. We're going to spend it on 2 different things.
Okay.
Stacy will figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a long list. So maybe that's part of what our conversation should move
Right.
towards, because
Maybe.
if we go back to the things that we could do for special appropriations, there's also the severance payments, which I arguably think absolutely should be a special appropriation because these are one-off costs relating to a reorganization. These would never normally be an operating line item. And so that's $106,000. And then we have this issue with the assessor's revaluation reserve, which totals $60,000 over the next 2 years, but is $30,000 in this year's budget and $30,000 next year. It's a reserve account for handling the revaluation process for the assessor's office, and it was basically underfunded. And she's very concerned she's not going to have enough money in there to deal with. This is for the legal stuff, right, Stacy? For Board of Assessment Appeals.
I'm sorry, Peggy.
The assessor's revaluation reserve.
Yes.
So that's a reserve amount that we just never, it's kind of like CIP. We didn't put enough money in to save it. And she's worried she's going to have a shortfall. So we need to get some money in there.
Years to get the balance to where we want to
Right.
get to.
So we budgeted an additional 30 grand this year, and then we would plan on doing another 30 grand next year to get to her to what she needs when we do the reval in 2 years.
Right.
So that was another item I was highlighting as a possible special appropriation.
Right. Stacy, if we can just go on a tangent for a second, what is the total dollar amount of the excess fund balance?
But I'm sorry, Bruce, I
What
couldn't
is
hear.
the dollar amount?
Hang on.
For undesignated, it's like 16 million, and then we have to have 8, right?
Well, there's a fund balance and then there's the excess fund balance.
Yes, so it's about 17 million, and right now, the way the policy is written, it's 10% of our total budget less debt, which is about 8 million.
Right.
So we do have quite a bit of an excess. The Board of Finance is talking about perhaps modifying that regulation. But right now, it's 10% of the total budget less debt service.
So it's about 17 less 8.
It's 9
Yeah.
million.
9 million.
Right?
So why don't we round that down to 8 million to accommodate whatever the Board of Finance may do, just for the sake of discussion. So from that 8 million of theoretically available excess funds, the Board of Finance has a plan to wean us off of their mill rate buy down, right? They're gonna, I think they indicated they're willing to do another $670,000 this year, right?
Mhm.
Stacy, do you know what the total of that is? That the sum of the 5 years?
For,
So,
uh,
but Bruce, I think what we should be doing right now is at least identifying things in the budget that make sense for special appropriation, right? And then having that list and agree to that list. And I can tell you right now, we're not going to get anywhere near $8 million on that list.
It's actually not, I just opened it up. So it's 17 million from last year's audit, which was in 20, with some projections for this year. So we have 17 million. The regulation as it stands right now is 8.3 million. So we have about $9 million over and above the current regulation.
Right.
And that includes what they're taking out, what Bruce was talking about, the six.
Not for next year yet. The 9 million is
Okay.
before they take anything out to balance next year's budget.
Okay.
And that was 673. So you're at
Which is, yeah, you're less than $1 million, so still.
Yeah, so let's just say 8.
Right, but we also can't speculate what they may or may not do either. I mean, I think
Right.
we got to do what we
Right.
think is right.
Right.
No, that is coming out.
Yeah.
That's not a,
No.
That is something they do when they set the
That's
mill rate.
after,
Oh,
Aaron.
right. Yeah.
Decide
This is,
on that.
That's
Oh.
at the end of the process.
But
last
they-
year they chose 678 to get the mill rate down to 0. And so this year they'll probably look at it again, decide what they want the mill rate to be, and figure out what amount they'd have to take out of the fund balance to get it to that target.
but they
It
were
could-
saying, they had a specific amount that they were saying.
They just put the same, last night when we were playing with numbers, I
They
put
don't-
the same exact amount
Right.
as last year, which was 673. That was
Right.
me throwing the number in there, but nothing is final until April,
But,
May,
right,
when they set the mill rate.
but keep in mind, Aaron, normally the conversation they had last night is what they have, 6 weeks from now. Because they don't technically have a budget to look at right now. They don't know what we're going to be recommending to them. So it was kind of a theoretical conversation last night.
Well, I only caught the second half.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it's a
thank you.
hypothetical
So-
conversation because they don't have a budget yet from
Right.
us to actually evaluate and see what they would need to do.
Did
So-
they have,
If Peggy, I don't have a quarrel with wanting to go through all the projects and decide. It is a large amount of money. I was simply trying to say that there are reservations on some of that money, and then there are also going to be revenues coming in. One of the reasons why this fund balance is so big is we do not bank on certain funding sources
Right.
every year, because we're worried that they're going to get lower and lower and lower. And today it was published, and we are the redheaded stepchild of this area when it comes to funding. When you look at Clinton and Guilford and Branford, towns around us, and the amount of money they get. But anyway, we can go through the projects and agree on what are the really good candidates for the special appropriations. I don't have
Right.
a problem with that.
Okay.
At some point, we're going to have to reconcile it against that
Right.
excess fund balance to make sure
Yeah.
that it's all there.
Right, exactly. And I think that's, my thought is, the decision for us really today is, do we want to stick with our original CIP number, or do we want to go with the one that they recommended? And then try to make up for it, through special appropriation. I'm comfortable sticking with the 300, but I understand if people would rather pull it back down to, pull the 65 out and then deal with that with the special appropriation. It's just going to change the schedule that was presented. And, maybe the 600 becomes 800. And then we funded at 235. We'd have to do the math for that, right? We'd have to up the 600 enough to account for the fact that over the next 10 years, we're reducing the funding in that account. So they'd have to do some work on that, what that special appropriation number would be to balance it. I'm okay doing that because I'm like, I still think we could afford to do 800. We could afford to do $1 million. It's really, what we think is reasonable. And we are significantly increasing the funding in that account already from last year, because it was $175,000 last year. So, but I also feel comfortable at 300 because we know at 300, if nothing happens on the special appropriation side, that'll help get us some progress.
Right. Stacy, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, but when we look at the capital spending, we've got the CNRE bucket, and that's where this is that's where these vehicles live, right?
No. Where these vehicles are, is that what you said?
Yeah, let me go back.
No,
to
they
it.
have their own fund. They
You're
have the
right.
highway equipment fund.
You're right. You're right. The highway equipment fund. Are there any? So the capital budget is as they've proposed, it's going from 3.5 to 3.76. A 6.4% increase.
Correct.
Putting the $600,000 into that doesn't change that at all, right? Because that's all standalone. And actually, kind of this budget kind of assumes that 600,000. It looks like.
Yeah, I mean, and we weren't during CIP. I think CIP came to John and said, "What could you do with 300,000?" And then there was also discussion on top of the 300,000 if we had a special appropriation. So then what we did is we went through with John the entire list, and that's what I'm sharing right now. This is what the consultant said we should be buying in year one, all of these vehicles. So we went through and we went back and forth, 800, 600. I personally was leaning towards a 600 because, as you mentioned, Bruce, there are some other competitors for the fund balance out there. And I thought 600 was a decent number to give us a jump start. And by doing that, you can see the rest of these vehicles, if we fund it at that $300,000 level, will be purchased. All of them, other than these 3 trucks and one small little item, will be purchased in year one. The small item will be purchased in year 2, and then the rest of the trucks will be in 2, 3, and 4. And you could see 2 of those trucks actually have new bodies on them. So I think John was comfortable pushing those trucks out. But, you know, as far as getting a consultant and paying him for his expertise and him telling us that we needed this 1.9, we thought it was imperative to get these purchased as soon as we could. And that was the best plan. Like I said, they ran 24 scenarios, all different ways. Did we do the 500 funding into CIP? Probably not, because I probably would have said that is way too much a jump in the budget base. Could we do it if we want to? Sure. But this was the best scenario that we were able to come up with. And this made John comfortable as far as getting his vehicles when he needs them.
So
And
I
it
just
seems like it spreads them out. It seems like
Yeah.
it spreads them out too.
Well, I just wondering though, so, you know, to get back to kind of what that we need to do for the budget, we have to make a decision. Do we want to stick with the 235? Do we want to go to the 300? Right. And it sounds like we're not quite there yet. So I'm wondering if we say, okay, this is definitely we're all supportive of some sort of special appropriation. We don't know the dollar amount yet. And then the 65,000 is really, I'm assuming the hesitancy about supporting it is because we got to look at all these other things, right?
Right.
So maybe we push this aside and then start talking about some of these other things.
I agree.
And you know, and then we're going to go back and look at all this again. So, because I think hearing from what I'm hearing from you, you'd prefer not to have a $65,000 increase right now in that account, and you'd rather deal with this outside of the budget. So let's maybe table that for now, and then, you know, think about it a little bit. And my thought is, if they can go and do, you know, in the model, if you keep it at 235, what special appropriation would be needed to get you to the same place within 5 years? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Actually, I was kind of going in a different place, and that was simply, can we take that money, put it somewhere else in the CIP to create a higher lease payment allowance in the vehicles, and still not have the capital budget go completely crazy. So, for instance, do we accelerate roads? Knock out more miles sooner, which decreases some of the out year expenses and shift that major roads money back into the vehicles. But if you want to
Yeah.
sort of table this for now, that's fine.
Okay, well, and I also feel like there was a lot of time spent in CIP on all those different accounts. And this is the one that, they were flagging as one that they really, were highlighting as needing more money, whereas roads or none of the others they felt comfortable with, right? And John did. And but I hear what you're saying. So, okay, so we'll table this. And then if we could maybe get that kind of scenario, sorry, Kristen. I used to use Goal Seek a lot in Excel, so maybe you can figure out a way to do that. So the next kind of special appropriation thing I wanted to talk about was the
just to hang on, Peggy, what
Yep.
exactly you want us to run the 300
so no 235.
and then see what the
Funding.
special would be to get to the
Right.
same vehicles? Okay.
Right, and by year 5, because keep in mind what you came up with heavily loads them in the first year or two. So if you look at a special appropriation that jumpstarts us further and still gets us to where we want to be in 5 years,
In 5 years.
right, at the 235 funding level.
And where we want to be in the sense of just accomplishing the 1.9 or
Yeah.
grabbing everything that at the end of 5 years would have that 10-year, 100,000 mile life.
I'm looking at it as trying to get to the same place, the 31,
Spread it out.
vehicles.
So then
Okay.
everything that's like the things that are just off his list are like teetering off his list. So now if you're getting those in year 6 and they probably should be done in year 2.
Well, but I'm looking at it, you're gonna have a lot more money up front. Okay, trying to figure out what dollar amount gets you to that 31 vehicle number in year 5 still.
By year 5,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
care that we were getting them all in year 1. You want to
Right.
spread it out over year 5. Keep the 235. What is that
Right.
special appropriation number?
Right, right.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
does that sounds like, I
He
think.
loves projects.
Have fun with that.
He will.
Okay. Good. I got a whole bunch of projects like Kristen. So. Okay, so the next thing is the severance payments relating to the early retirement incentive program. And so I thought the materials that I sent you, if you go to the first page of that,
Is this the first page or is this the first page?
That's the first page.
okay, so the severance amount is $106,000. And
Sorry,
just so and if you want to go to actually the second page real quick, because this shows you what the budget's going up. Okay, if you go to the salaries lines, this is like this is a walkthrough of where all the increases are from last year's budget to this year's budget. If you go through here and you see $106,000 of that total salary line is related to severance payments, okay? And then you have 160 related to police contracts. And then the affiliated and unaffiliated increase for everybody else. All the other staff is $54,000. So this would basically take that 106 and strip it out of the budget because it's a one-time payment. And then if you want to go back to the other slide again, that kind of gives you an idea, of what the budget would look like if you stripped it out. To me, this makes sense to do. I guess historically, this is not how it was done. It was always just in weight, because it looks like your salary line's going up by some exorbitant amount, and these are one-time costs.
This is a no-brainer.
Yeah, okay, good. So I just wanted to make sure, I think this is a recommendation we should make, strip it out of the budget and ask for a special appropriation for this. Is there any other kind of debate about that? Anybody uncomfortable with that request?
Not one bit.
Okay, so we won't need to spend any more time on it. I think that's just what we do as part of our recommended budget. the next thing was this revaluation reserve. We're short some money in that account and this is for, in 2 years, we were going to have a revaluation in town and we get a ton of people appealing, right? And so we just don't have enough money in the account to deal with all the appeals process. And I guess we just kind of it's a guesstimate. You don't know how many people are going to appeal, and what level they're going to take their appeals. And she feels like we don't have enough money in that account to prepare for it. It's a reserve account. So
Right. So
we
the
tackled it.
30,000 special appropriation takes it to 60,000, which is what we think is the right amount. Is that correct?
No, we're 60,000, we need $60,000 over the next 2 years. So what we were planning on doing was doing 30 in the budget this year and 30 next year. And instead just taking that 30,000 this year and 30,000 next year and doing a one-off 60 right into the account. And the line item in the budget stays flat the next couple of years. That 30 represents the increase in the account, not the total for the account.
But if we're going to recommend a special appropriation, we're recommending a $60,000 special appropriation. Right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. This is just showing, though, it saves us 30,000 in this year's budget if we go for a special on that.
Peggy, is this what Kristen sent us? Or is this something different?
Yeah,
This
this
is what
is,
Kristen sent.
it's page 2, Erin.
Because I'm on, oh, okay. One had lines and one didn't. I was getting confused. Okay.
Yeah, she's just got the actual Excel model up. but
Yes, no, I know. I was just, okay, good.
I work in Excel.
No, I like Excel. it was throwing me off. Okay.
So this one is another one where, it's basically kind of like with the vehicles, we're trying to right size the reserve account. Because we know this is coming. Now, the question is, we don't have to even do the special appropriation now. We could just go for whatever we're under budgeted in the year that the revaluations happen. But planning would be better to do this and set it aside because, she's pretty confident that we're way underfunded in the account.
I mean, it kind of makes sense to just do it as a special appropriation, I think, and be done with it.
I would agree. And it's $60,000, right? Hey, we got $8 million.
Yeah, and I do think by the time next year's budget, I mean, we should have a new projection for the next 5 years at 60 or the level that we're funding it, maybe 85,000. May have to jump up a little bit next year, but this will cover us for this upcoming reval in 2 years from now.
Right. So this account will need to grow at one point to make sure we're accounting for it correctly, but that's a big hit to take, right? 30 grand and so each year. So I think this seems very reasonable to do this. And, if we arguably we could have just left it flat and rolled the dice and then would have had to dealt with it, as a special appropriation in 3 years when they actually do the reval. But the right thing to do is acknowledge that we know it's coming and to do some sort of savings account for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one where I don't know, does anybody dispute pulling that out, the 30 grand for this year? No?
No.
Okay. So those are the two, what I thought were pretty straightforward ones. The next one I want to talk about, as Stacy, we kind of talked about this a little bit. We had met with the Water Pollution Control Authority about doing this WPCA study that we're way overdue from, and we might even be mandated to do if we don't do it soon. They had presented to us about this. And so we weren't quite sure what the cost of this was going to be. And I actually spoke to Tom Hansen yesterday, and he thinks it's going to cost us roughly $150,000 to do this study. Half of it is reimbursed by the state, or 55%. And it comes out of the clean water funding. And they will work closely with us to make sure that we qualify for reimbursement on the study. So we looked at our planning reserve yesterday to see, do we have enough in our planning reserve? And I don't think we do. We could handle half of it, probably, no problem, which is really what it's going to cost us. But we can't handle pulling $150,000 out of it this year. That would leave us short for all these other things that we want to do. And so knowing that it's going to be reimbursed, half of it, my thought was going for at least the full study as a special appropriation. And then when the reimbursement comes in, that just goes into the general fund. Or we just try to pay for half of it, the half that is not reimbursed, that can go through the planning reserve, which I think we're okay on, right, Stacy? As we kind of went through, we can handle 75,000. We just can't handle the 150 out of that account. So I don't know. And Stacy, we didn't get to this level of talking, but I'm just trying to figure out how to account for this.
Well, Peggy, it seems like we do this WPCA study once every 45 years. So I'm not sure it belongs in the operating budget.
Right, right.
The planning reserve rolls over from year to year, right, Stacy? It grows.
Yes.
Would you recommend we just do the special appropriation and drop it into that and spend it out of there when we finally have a thing?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the money's coming out of the excess fund when it comes, when we get reimbursed. It would just go back there.
Sure.
I didn't follow that. Could you explain that
So
again?
I mean, the Board of Finance will make this decision, but the idea would be to just ask for the 150 to be dropped into the planning account. The one that doesn't have enough money in it right now. When the study is set, we pay for it out of that account. When the state reimburses us, that reimbursement would go back into the excess fund balance. So
Isn't that the same thing? I thought
Yeah,
that's the same thing that Peggy just said.
Yeah,
Isn't
doesn't
that
that
exactly
bring you to the
what's
same
the
place?
difference?
Nothing.
I'm just concerned that I want to be able to, we have other things we need that planning reserve. The balance in the planning reserve, if we funded at the current level for this year, would be $158,000 starting July 1. And we have to pay for affordable housing. We're going to need some money for that. The Island Avenue possibly thing, we're going to need some money for that. There's a couple of other things floating around. We might need the money for that. So I could envision writing a check for 75,000. I'm just looking at this from a very simplistic basis, but we can't, if we do 150,000, we have 8,000 left to cover all these other things. So,
But you had said half out of the planning reserve would still, we would be okay with. And then
Right.
half out of the other. So, I mean, why that makes sense.
so I'm just saying, so we would basically, I'm just looking at it simplistically. So we would, half of it would come out of the planning reserve, and then we'd still have to go through a special appropriation for
Right.
75,000 that will get reimbursed. Yeah, that, right. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. And then it gets reimbursed back to the fund.
Right. Right. I just don't want anybody saying that, why didn't you budget for this? So,
But, for the study?
yeah, for the study. So that's
Well,
why I wanted to put it on.
the alternative is we put it as an extra budget allocation, right? An additional budget request.
Additional budget request of 75,000.
Correct.
Well, no,
That's gonna go
because
over well.
Hard to argue wastewater.
right. I mean, it really is, it's a plan, the planning account, it's going to squeeze the planning account a lot to put it in there. That's the problem I have with
How
it.
does that get replenished?
We
From where?
budget every year.
Budget
We have a
every
set
year,
amount
yeah.
we put in every year.
We put 50 grand in every year.
Oh, okay.
And right now the balance is 108. It's going to go to 158. We have a few things we got to pay for. So all these little studies like the Island Avenue septic study, there's some coastal resiliency work that needs to get done in studies. So that's going to be coming out of it. any kind of other planning. You know, luckily we're not doing the emergency services one, so that freed up 40,000 that I had been kind of tallying. So, so that's going to help it. So it sounds like we're okay with just, you know, notifying that we're going to need another $75,000 for the study. Somehow.
I mean, I like the elegance of asking for 75 and then giving 75 back. But I think from a flexibility perspective, it makes more sense to have the 150 dumped into the reserve account now. And then as things come up, you're not going back to the well to replenish it because something that we don't imagine right now has come up that we want to spend reserve money on. The 75 is coming back to the town if the state makes good on it. The worst case is there's a little bit of extra money in that reserve account for a couple of years while we figure out what to do with it.
I think that's the better thing too, because it would really tie our hands if some things come up that we want to look for, or we under budgeted on some studies that we were going to do. And I'm confident with the state because I've been confirmed by the deputy commissioner that the money is there and available, and they are very supportive of us doing the study. So we will get our half of it paid for. Okay, so it sounds like that's on our special appropriation list.
Yep.
Sounds like we're all in violent agreement.
Okay, good. All right.
Full
Except for-
150? Is that what you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that was kind of the last on my list in terms of special appropriation possibilities. And that totals, if you do you know, I don't know if you want to do a little running total there. Well, it would be 6, yeah. Well, I guess it, yeah, but okay.
It's like 917
Yeah.
in round numbers.
Including the 600, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, and then, you know, the other stuff is really more a debate about what the budget should be, right? And those are all the line items that we need to kind of talk about. But I think it's helpful to, you know, to pulling out the 106 and the 30 gives us a little bit better understanding of what we're starting from.
Yep. You mentioned the message boards in your note to us.
Oh, I put, well, this was, the CIP had said rather than, this wouldn't change the CIP funding. It was just one of the uses in CIP for, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong. The 42,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's included in CNRE, so it would not change what we're putting into the fund. It would just free up the funds sooner than later and get the message boards now versus waiting till
Right.
July 1st.
And also, let me just the one
Okay.
comment was that part of the discussion was also because of that we might be able to get reimbursed for some of this under COVID and stuff. So there was an opportunity. So to just pull it out of CIP altogether and deal with it separately.
I think because it's a year one drop in, I think it is, and I would expect this is going to be a fairly durable product that we're not going to have to create a reserve account for replenishment. It is a good candidate to pull it out of the CIP, leave that money there for another project, and do a special appropriation request.
Okay.
My opinion.
What was that, 42,000?
I mean, I think that's the right thing to do because I'm hoping we'll get it reimbursed or partially reimbursed.
And what I would propose is if we got it reimbursed, that we evaluate some sort of permanent installation of signage at strategic areas. Sort of like what you see when you go up to Saybrook.
Yeah, I talked to Sam and he was going to look into, we talked about the ambulance, putting something there, you know, permanent as you get off the highway and there's a lot of traffic flow. And yeah, he was going to look into that. I don't think he actually got any pricing or estimates, but, because that's a little bit more of a, it's a built-in thing. Clinton has one downtown also.
Right. I mean, there's probably always going to be a need for the mobile units, but some strategically placed permanent fixtures, I think, would be nice and something that should be on our horizon in the future, in our thinking in the future.
Okay, so that doesn't really affect our budget per se, but is something that we might want to, we would highlight in our recommendations.
So,
So,
and one drop in, were there any other one and done type of projects in CIP that were year one drop-ins that we should consider in the same vein?
well, downtown center project, but I think the issue with downtown center project is until those easements signed. You know, I think we should continue to just, you know, this would make funds available July 1, which is, I think, a reasonable target.
Okay, what's next?
So, so our next step would then be, if we don't want to start going through literally the list by the additional budget request list, we could just talk about the schedule. Is there anybody that we're going to want to have back at our next workshop? Library, ambulance, any of the town departments, or are we all good? We just need to talk about it. Because I'd like to schedule them then. I personally don't need to have anybody come back, but
You live this every day, Peggy.
I know. Oh my God. But if there's somebody that, you know, feels strongly that they need to have, you know, somebody come back, then let us schedule them in for our next workshop.
These highlighted are the additional requests that's in your additional budget requests section. So we have Austin, Senior Center, Land Use, Beach and Rec, Public Works, Town Clerk, Registrars, Fire Marshal, Library, Ambulance.
And light up Madison. So we can, if you want to spend a few minutes, some of these I think are pretty no-brainers. And I would point out the Beach and Rec 7-day coverage. I mean, I would go back to the next slide, the first page again, because that's the list that everybody's familiar with, Stacy.
I think it's,
Or
yeah,
it's
it's just
second-
different
yeah, it
order.
might be, it might be the other, yeah, there. So the Beach and Rec 7-day coverage, is there any dispute or discussion that's needed on that? Because we talked about this last year a lot, and then obviously went through the summer from hell. And I think we heard loud and clear that people want to have, you know, 7 days a week coverage at gates, lifeguards, everything.
This is part of the, but what was last year an abnormal year as far as usage though of the facilities because of COVID? And we were seeing a lot of, oh, no, because of Hammond Asset, right? You know,
I think it
because of
was
the
higher,
whole issue.
higher usage.
Yeah.
What's that?
No, yeah, it was
I think
higher.
higher usage.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
So is that going to be consistent or is that an anomaly?
I think we used to have, we always had 7-day coverage.
No, I know.
We kind of
Okay.
as a strategy decided to let's try to roll back on the 2 days a week that aren't that busy.
Yeah, no, I remember
Yeah.
the discussion and
Yeah.
I'm not arguing against it. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, you know, if the volume is what it was, then I could definitely say we need the coverage. We're just expanding it to 2 more days though.
Yeah. My view is that just having kind of understanding now operationally what happens at the beach and how the staffing works and how the public is, consistency is so important. And I think it caused it causes confusion when you have a change during certain days of the week. it kind of just creates, I don't know, confusion. And I felt like the better thing to do was just to have a steady 7 days a week, gate guards, lifeguards, and, you know, consistency in coverage. And then what Scott does, if it rains, he doesn't call in staff. So he has the flexibility, and he gives money back at the end of the year. He manages his budget very well. And he does end up not having staff come in on certain days when it's light or if the weather's bad. This gives him maximum flexibility. And typically at the end of the year, he ends up having funds left over, right, Stacy? I mean, he manages his staff very well. And what saved us this last summer, because we ended up having to pull people in, is you know, he juggled really well this summer. And we ended up adding people in May that normally we didn't have gate guards in May. And it was amazing how many people screamed and yelled, like the first week of May, why isn't there somebody at the West Wharf gate? There's never been somebody at the West Wharf gate in May. So we ended up able to balance it and provide the funding. And we have not gone for a special appropriation this year, despite all that. Whereas this will give him, you know, what he needs to do to manage it. And hopefully, you know, we won't have a crazy summer again this year, but I don't know. I mean, people are going to get on airplanes. Our summer camp's going to be open. That's probably the biggest question. All those kids that normally are at camps couldn't go to camp this summer. So they're going to be going to the beach in Madison.
Peggy, is this your recommendation, or is it a recommendation coming from Beach and Rec as well?
Beach and Rec as well. They are feel that they all along felt the 7-day coverage was important. And then this is my recommendation too, just operationally.
Why? Okay, so I have this is a little off topic, but so the reorg's going into effect in July. But so why doesn't the budget reflect the reorg? Why are we still treating Beach and Rec separate from senior services?
It was just easier for us to keep the two departments, especially with the new accounting system. However, everything that was presented, for example, Scott retiring and staying on part-time, that is reflected in the Beach and Rec budget. And then the increase for the staff and senior is reflected in their budget. We can combine them once the year starts. It was just easier for us to keep a line and keep track of what was moving forward.
Because I was confused because they're keeping the same budget and then they put in the additional requests. But if the departments are changing, then how could the budgets be the same as last year?
They're not. The additional budget request shows a movement in both senior and the beach. They're looked at as one. It's just your budget book keeps them separate. That's all. They're still looked at as one.
Okay.
So, and there's actually, if you go into the back of your budget book, it actually does a walkthrough of all the pluses and minuses in terms of the staff.
And this is what you'll see in your additional budget request tab. You'll see the Beach and Rec, and then you'll see the changes in senior. It is all kept together. It's just in the accounting system, we kept the two. It was cleaner for us to keep the two departments separate for reporting. But when you look at all of this together, we're combining the two.
All right.
And if you also notice, that includes the retirement packages in those numbers.
Got it.
So, and we'll be pulling those out. So
actually that's a great call out, Peggy. We've got the 22.7 in our additional ask, but if you take out the 106, Stacy, doesn't that change the 22.7?
I took out the 55 because it's only Scott that's included in this department. It doesn't include Billy and another person. So if I took out, while you were talking, this 55,000, if we pull that out, this request is really not an additional request because we're saving 32,000.
We're making money. We need to do more of that.
I'm trying.
Could Scott's temporary position be could that come out of special appropriation? Because it's a one-time?
We talked about that. However, in the plan, in the early retirement plan, we gave Austin a year and then potentially to hire a recreation supervisor in year 2. So this would give us that to hire that person in year
Got
2.
it. Okay. So
Yep.
back to the 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think this is really, it's recommended by Beach and Rec. I recommend it. I think Scott and the Beach and Rec department would prefer it, obviously. I think the public wants it. They just, I think we're still going to have a really crazy summer, to be honest. Just because I don't think people are going to be traveling still a lot. And people are in summer camps, are going to be more reduced until kids are vaccinated. And, it's really going to be the next year after that. What we could do, though, is monitor and track, attendance on days. So we
That's
have
what we
data.
said. That's exactly what we said we were going to do this past year.
Well, let's just say that this past year we're barely keeping our head above water.
Okay.
In terms of,
Because I think that came up and we said, we'll do 5, but then we'll monitor it. And if there's the data that shows we need it.
well, now what we had to do, and we do have some data, that is because we had to track, I had them track cars and turnaways
Mhm.
because we were
right.
closing things and keep in mind, we were also closed to non-residents on the weekends. But we were open to non-residents during the week. We did not sell a lot of passes though. So, yeah, I mean, I guess he tracked every day starting in July, parking. And then we had to do walk-ins. I don't remember, to be honest. He's got a ton of data.
He does have a ton
Have
of
we
data.
analyzed that? I couldn't, I, to be honest, at this point, no, that was all about capacity,
Right.
On the
Right.
beach. But you're right. I mean, that is something that I think we might be in a better position now to, we're still worrying about COVID, social distancing rules. We could maybe focus on like, okay, are we making enough money on pass sales to cover the additional cost of, staff?
So you think we should fund the 7-day and do the data rather than keep it at 5 and do the data?
I think so, because let's be honest, we can just tell Scott to not staff those days, and then see what happens. The money comes back to the town at the end of the year. So it's not like, he's going to go spend it on anything else. We could look at it, and if we're getting midway through the summer and there's no one there on Mondays and Tuesdays, we could try to save money and just say, let's just cut it for it and see if we get a bunch of complaints. I mean, we can do that,
Well, isn't it better to have the funds available too versus then have to go back to the well?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it also means that what if we have those crazy, some other unforeseen thing that we're going to have to deal with in staffing? We were talking about, I am a little worried. Are we going to have to staff in May this year? I don't think we have the funds available to staff in May this year because we had to staff last year. That's a conversation that we were going to have and look at the accounts he has and everything and figure it out.
I think probably the prudent thing to do is to plan on the 7-day coverage. We can continue to monitor the traffic in the slow days, but we got a little caught out last year. And I think you're right, Peggy. I think that we're going to see a tremendous demand on the beaches again this year. And if it turns out that this was a slow year on the Monday, Tuesdays, like it has been in past years, we can always rethink it in the next cycle.
That seems reasonable.
So it's not just 7 days though. Could it also mean adding people if there's a day that's really busy and they need backup? They need more people to come than we're scheduled.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I
'cause
think I think that's an important distinction, because it's not just about putting people there on days when there might not be anyone at the beach. It's also having the staff available in case there's a mad rush on the beaches, which there could be again.
Right. But
Yeah, and
importantly, the hiring for this summer staff, especially the lifeguards, really happens in March. So that's not a lever we could pull in June to say, hey, let's add 5 more guards to cover the extra days. They're not going to be around to do that. We've got to lock them up this winter.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just saying it's not just about 7-day coverage. It's about having additional manpower in case we need it on any given day.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're right. And we did have to throw on a bunch of people at times, especially when we started having to count head count and stuff like that. We needed additional staff for that. We also started having to monitor Lowry, people coming and going into there. Yeah. And then we had people racing. We had, we added, added somebody from building and grounds and had like a supervisor. We did a lot this year, and I give Scott a lot of credit for managing a lot of this within his budget. I don't know if we'll be giving anything back, but we're going to be going through all that, I think, soon, just to see where we are, because I am worried about May. And if right now, I don't know if we have any money to staff May or people, to be honest, because the college kids are usually what you hire. So
this money is really about additional staffing as needed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that it's built on a model of 7-day coverage, but he has flexibility to move things around when he needs to.
I mean, there wouldn't be more money asked for things like you just described.
No, we didn't last year. So
like if you decide it has to be, we need coverage, it could come out of this.
Well, I don't know. No, May, I'm talking about this May. Not next May, because last May, we were able to cover because he had a buffer in his accounts to do so. This May, I'm not sure, because we really pushed the budget this year because of all the staffing that we needed. And that we were only budgeting for 5-day coverage. So, but that's something that we'll have to talk about separately. I don't know where we are on it.
Okay.
So we can continue to tick some of these off, or do you guys want to, we're kind of reaching our 5:30 timeframe. Do you want to, I mean, I guess, first of all, are we all good on the 7-day coverage? I know you have a lot of questions, Erin, but are you comfortable?
Oh, no, yeah, I'm just,
okay.
I'm comfortable. I just want about my understanding then.
Okay. All right. So, so we can then either just decide to keep going, or we can decide, we'll just start tackling these at our next one.
We do in our next one. I'm driving in a car and it's really frustrating and hard to participate. So. Okay.
And I'm fine with that. I mean, I think, if I look at this list, some are longer conversations with others. I just want to confirm, do we feel we need any staff or library or ambulance that we need to schedule for our next meeting? Sounds like not.
No.
So
well, it's just hard. It's kind of hard to know, but.
Well, why don't you look through and, think about it, but we just need to get them on the schedule. That's all I wanted to notice and plan. You can always email me, our next one is in.
So we have one on the 17th, but that's the Board of Ed presentation at 6 o'clock, and that's before a Board of Finance meeting. So that meeting will only be an hour. And then our next workshop is Monday, the 22nd. So you do have a little bit of time if you want to invite staff. And then we also have the 25th if we need it, that Thursday.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because the Board of Ed, the one that's Wednesday, I mean, that's just the Board of Ed doing their presentation, right? And then, can we have, that's a joint workshop though, right? So can we have our own workshop, like tag on a half an hour, or no? Or we just want to, I'm just trying to get this stuff done earlier rather than later. So it sounds like the next one, like today, is not until the 22nd.
Would
You
we
can-
lose Stacy and Kristen though, right? Because
Yeah,
they have to go to Board of Finance.
You'll definitely lose me.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. So I guess we'll just stick to the schedule. All right. Well, just because we have to come back on the vehicle study stuff, and then we just have to go through. I mean, I'm happy to spend a few more minutes on some simple ones like holiday lighting. How did that get to 22,000? I thought it was 13.
It is
But it's
13.
13.
What am I? Oh, I've got my glasses are okay. It's 13. What is the thought on holiday lighting? Maybe we can just get this one done.
Well, all things being equal, I would like it. I think it needs to drop down to the bottom of our priority list because it's clearly a nice to have. And if we get to the point where we have to start axing things out of here, but if the money is there, I think it was a great event, and would love to see it continue on.
But is the suggestion here to make it a special appropriation?
No, because we're talking about adding it to the operating budget every year, right?
Like, yeah, that we would do this every year.
I think people loved it. I think people want it.
I do too. I got a lot of people really liked it, and I think I got a bunch of emails of people just saying it'd be great if we could do this every year.
And it would be. It would be, but I mean, at some point, we're going to say 4.7% increase is probably not in the cards, right? Or are we saying that?
I know that's part of the conversation. So I guess then lighting, I mean, the other thing that I talked about with Lauren is that's a lot of money every year for lighting, and that's assuming this company comes in and does it. And this is an increase because it's actually the total cost, I think, is like 20. I don't remember the exact details, but the selectmen's budget includes like money for lighting and wreaths on Wall Street. I don't know. There was something for years, like the selectmen pay for the wreaths and the lights on Wall Street, and then the chamber does the wreaths on Main Street. So we were talking about there's got to be a cheaper way to do this if we're going to do it every year. You know, do we purchase the lights ourselves? You know, is there a way to get it a reduced? So maybe we just cut the budget down and see if we can find something, you know, sustainable, because that's a lot of money every year to spend on lighting. And we could just put something in there as a good faith effort to say we want to sustain it and then figure it out.
To just pick a number.
Yeah, I don't know what the right number is. So why don't we flag that as let's deal with it once we've gone through some of the other stuff as a possible reduction opportunity?
As we like it, but we don't know how we're going to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more this commitment. That's, you know, to do that every year, $20,000 a year just on lighting up downtown seems like there's got to be a more efficient way to have the same experience, but not have it be, you know, so expensive every year. And maybe if we did a long-term contract, it wouldn't be so expensive. You know, the company might cut us a deal and say, if you do a 3-year or 5-year contract, you know, because then they could use the same lights. Because I think they dispose of these things at the end.
Why can't they just leave them up?
I mean, I guess we could just do that and never take them down.
No, I mean, don't light them, just leave them up.
Oh, I'd like to hear different people's opinions of that.
Why? Because they would look bad?
Yeah.
They're clear.
But it's
Guys,
all
we're in the weeds. We're in the weeds on this
I know.
now. I mean,
I know.
So the
All right,
senior
so-
services is really not going to be the 22.7.
Right. Well, no, the net is this 22.7, right?
No, if we do the special appropriation, we're backing 50-some thousand out of there, right, Stacy?
That's down here though, Bruce. So it's already taken out of these numbers.
Right.
So I would move the 55, this number would go down, and then yes, it would not look like an addition, but this number down here would still be the same.
Right, because we're still high, we still have to account for the other hire, right? But I'm assuming we're all comfortable with the reorganization plan that includes hiring the municipal agent part-time. So if we're comfortable with that, it's really just how you know, optically where you put it on the spreadsheet. And maybe the better way to do it is show, because it looks like it's an expense when in reality we're saving on the personnel side, but we're having expenditure on the severance side. So
maybe just a note there, Stacy, where you have your cursor to say this is offset with the reduction below. Yeah.
okay. So is there any here that people are, maybe I should just say, are 100% supportive of? What about the registrars? I feel that to me is a no-brainer.
I'm completely supportive of that one.
Yeah. I mean, that's just increasing their rate of pay to minimum wage, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting the rate up.
Yeah, it's just getting their rate up to pay the $1,200. So I'm assuming everybody's good with that. And then, you know, we had a big presentation on land use about the position that Dave Anderson, you know, is recommending for the reorganization of land use. And remember, his department has actually reduced staff members from the early retirement incentive plan. And then he also reduced hours for the zoning enforcement officer. So this is the net number, correct, Stacy?
This is the difference. Yeah, there's some, I'll show you the details behind it. This does not take into account what he reduced his budget by 2 years ago for that open position when Bob Cookta retired.
Right.
So that would come out of there. But what this does, the current inland wetlands officer would be reduced from 73,000 down to 54. So there's a savings of almost 19,000 there. And then the land use assistant is retiring. That was part of the ARIP. And then the new person is making less. So there's a savings there. If we take those two savings and net that out from this new environmental planner, that comes to the 43,000. And then to Dave's point, I just want to make sure this doesn't get forgotten that he did reduce his budget for this for last year. But I think it was about 29,000 because he didn't replace a position that he fought for and it was open. But we had talked to him and he took one for the team and reduced his budget base. So he's asking to restore that amount that he did have 2 years ago.
So I'm comfortable with this because I think this is really needed in town with to have this environmental planner. And this is what the presentation was on that we had, you know, when we talked through the reorganization. So any other thoughts from the board?
No, I mean, I think as we sit here today, I'm inclined to support this.
I support it.
Okay.
I support it too. I wonder if, do we have to talk about the requests for additional positions to, I don't know, under a whole umbrella? Does that make sense? We also have Public Works, right? Is a new position?
Yeah, I was just jumping to ones that I felt you guys have had a lot of information on because land use was one we had a whole presentation on.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah. We can go to Public Works next if we'd like, or town clerk, or we can break and just handle the rest of these. If people want to keep going till 6 o'clock, we could do that and just keep ticking these off.
Well, I think Scott was hoping for some mercy here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to take a break and then, because these other ones are a little bit trickier.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I'd prefer to start fresh and talk about them.
Okay. All right, so we'll stop here, but just so I understand, are we on land use? We're all comfortable with the land use position? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
We go visit
Yes.
this. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, hey, we got a lot done, I think. And then if you can, in the next couple of days, let me know if I need to schedule anybody to come to our workshop on the 22nd. Let us know next week. That would be good. Okay. And then we'll go from there. Okay.
All right.
Yep.